how was last night's event at Sunraven?
We had a great turnout. There were about 26 people crammed into our teepee, which was the largest crowd we've had in there ever, and it seemed to me to be a result of how people are feeling about this upcoming eclipse and feeling a combination of anxiety and anticipation and looking for something meaningful to come out of it, so that they attended with their ears and hearts wide open.
And I guess that leads us into the first question. What is all the excitement about?
You know, this is an interesting time. I would say, metaphorically, there is a shadow hanging over us that people are now so acutely aware of. And the eclipse, in essence, is a celestial mirror of the earth-born shadow. So I think people are sensing the power of this moment. Perhaps the anticipation aspect of it, which is the potential, we hope, for some real transformation, the overcoming of the shadow with some element of light.
You know, you mentioned in the Sunraven newsletter, and I guess before we discuss that, explain to folks how they can sign up for it.
I write a letter, which is essentially a newsletter, as you pointed out, but I call it a moon letter because I send it out on the morning of the new moon every 28 or 29 days, as it turns out. So, for instance, it went out this morning because this afternoon is when the new moon occurs. Of course, we know that the eclipse, the solar eclipse, can only happen on the date of a new moon because that's when the moon is fully in front of the sun. Normally, it's just that it's unique when it creates the eclipse, when the shadow really goes directly over the sun. So that's when I send out the letter on a monthly basis, calling into alignment the idea that we are really connected to these heavenly bodies. And since I do want to connect with the community on a periodicity, rather than use a conventional Caesarean month, I use the lunar month, which I think is more traditional and more connected to the earthly calendar.
And in that moon letter, you refer to astrological intensity. What is that?
Well, you know, we take for granted, I think, to some extent, the power and the forces of these huge objects that circulate around the Earth. You know, that's a very egocentric term that we've replaced with knowledge of the celestial heavens not circulating around the Earth, but we are egocentric to some extent. We look at the universe through our own minds and eyes, and the sun, as an example, is something that we see every day and we feel every day, and the moon comes and goes in its various cycles. And there have been people for thousands of years, if you think back to the first conscious being, who must have looked at these bodies, these huge bodies, not to mention the zillions of stars, and started to question and come up with understanding of not just the phenomena, but the meaning of the phenomena.
Now, this is obviously, for you, this is like the Super Bowl. You're in tune with this, and you are aware of what the moon is doing at all times. But for folks who are stuck in an office today, can they still somehow reap the benefits of this, or somehow still be in tune, even if they're stuck under fluorescent lights in an office building somewhere?
Yeah, I think the simplest thing to do is just to be aware of it, which I have to believe most people are because of the way social media works these days, and even the conventional news media is making it clear that this event is occurring and warning people also about perhaps not looking directly at the sun for any length of time, which is the typical fear component of any news event. More important, though, to your question, which is what can people do, is one, just be aware of it and think about what it would have been if they were living here 10,000 years ago and this sudden sun that they're so used to got blotted out. I mean, what it would produce within them in terms of a moment of perhaps anxiety, but followed by this resolute understanding that the sun stood its ground and the shadow passed. And it really is an opportunity for us to take what happens around us and consider how we connect that to our own lives. And so consciousness, awareness, and if you can, get outside to just not necessarily look at the sun, but look at what changes in terms of the mood and the energy as a result of this dimness that's going to occur for several hours and come in and then go out. And maybe consider setting an intention of this being a transitional moment in your own life. This is the opportunity that these events make possible.
When you hear that people are traveling great distances and crisscrossing the country to get better vantage points, better views, this doesn't surprise you?
No, because this is people have chased powerful natural events all along. You just think of the tornado chasers. We are awestruck by nature in general. It's very few people that I know who haven't commented that at least several times in their lives a beautiful sunset, a sunrise has touched them. And when people have auspicious events in their lives, let's say the birth of children or weddings, how they think about the weather events that day, the way the clouds form or rainbows or other things. And this is part of our need to appreciate that there's something greater than our individual lives. And when we do, it puts into perspective the power and the awesomeness of our own existence. So it's no surprise that people want to get close to it.
And, of course, they should heed the warnings that they've heard so far about doing so safely.
Yes, I mean, for sure. And that said, I think people also can realize that it's quite common that the news media plays up the fear aspects of...
No.
And so I think that it's, yes, be mindful. Looking at the shadow of the sun, seems more comfortable than usual, but the corona, the sphere around it can burn your retina. So, meaning the little cells on the back of your eye, which help you see light. So don't get deceived and don't stare at it. But as I would say, the emphasis is not necessarily looking at the sun and the shadow and the moon in front of it, but look at the way the light changes all around us. Look at the shadows cast on the ground and the way the trees and the grass and even streetscapes change. It's very powerful. This doesn't happen that often, I think, in most people's lives. People who are listening, this is the first and only time it's going to happen. So this is quite an event.
And how will you be observing it at Sunraven?
Well, my plan is I've sort of cleared our schedule here, and we have this property which is we call Sunraven because it's interesting juxtaposition of the sun and the dark raven and the transformation of the power of this Native American totem that comes from the Pacific Northwest. Interesting, where the first landfall, if you will, of this eclipse will take place as well. But the idea is that in our lives there often are dark moments, and we seek the return of the light. And that's the story of Sunraven. And our property then and our practice is to bring people here to collect as a community, to share this experience together, and to appreciate, not necessarily process, work it, but just to be and to get as much out of it, soak it up.
Is there anything else you'd like to add, anything else we should know going into this event?
I think, like many of these events, this is an opportunity to pause in our lives. And you mentioned people who are working in the middle of the day, they may be busy, but if you can take a few minutes to really pause, to hit the pause button, to reflect on your life up until this moment perhaps, and then ask yourself the question, is there some way I could pivot a little bit? Is there an adjustment I can make? This is almost similar in some ways to the way people look at New Year's and they make their New Year's resolution. This is not an arbitrary date on the calendar. This is actually a celestial event that cannot be ignored. It's going to make everyone's world a little darker for a moment, but then it will pass. And so this is a really good opportunity to set an intention for a new beginning, and that's what I would suggest.
Well, I have to tell you, as soon as I realized that this was something that everyone wanted to be a part of, you're the first person I thought that we should check in with and hear from.
Well, thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and share the good news. The good news is that these things are constantly in motion, and there are opportunities for us, no matter how challenging our life may be in the moment, to be hopeful about the potential for sort of the reunity of hope and life and light and faith. So that's what I appreciate when you called me. Thank you.
And the website is slowmedicine.org.
Correct.
Dr. Michael Finkelstein, thank you so much for your time.
John, have a great day, and everyone listening, I hope it's a great, auspicious moment for us all.
Standing on the moon, I got no cobweb on my shoe. Standing on the moon, I'm feeling so alone and blue. I see the Gulf of Mexico as tiny